At long last, we are finally here. Part 3 of New York City Subway Remnants and Provisions, where we'll look at remnants of old infrastructure and provisions for future infrastructure on the New York City Subway in Brooklyn. Before we begin, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Also consider checking out my Patreon and YouTube memberships, where you can get early access to videos among other benefits. We also have a Discord server. Links for all of these are in the description. Last, I want to give a huge thanks to Welcome to an Experience for allowing me to use their footage in this video, and to Peter Dougherty for allowing me to use the track maps in his book, Tracks of the NYC Subway. Without further delay, here's some hidden infrastructure in Brooklyn. Before the BMT Jamaica Line's connection to the Williamsburg Bridge opened in 1908, the line ran straight from Marcy Avenue to the East River at Broadway Ferry. This was known as the Broadway Ferry Spur during the brief period when trains ran over the bridge as well as to Broadway Ferry. The spur has since been demolished, but a short section of trackway exists directly west of Marcy Avenue, right as the tracks curve onto the bridge. The line was extended over the Williamsburg Bridge in order to provide a direct link into Manhattan, eliminating the hassle of transferring to a ferry. Later, after many delays in the construction of the southern portion of the line in Manhattan, this connection also allowed trains to run through Manhattan into downtown Brooklyn and onto Coney Island. Right above the platforms of Broadway on the IND Crosstown Line is a shell, 4 island platforms and 6 trackways that would have been a transfer point between 2 major trunk lines on the IND second system. This station would have had the same layout as Hoyt-Schermerhorn streets. Heading west from the station, there would have been 3 branches. One branch would have split from the 2nd Avenue line at 23rd Street before running down 16th Street, Avenue C, and Stanton Street, where it would cross the East River. The second branch would have split from the IND 6th Avenue line at 2nd Avenue before continuing under Houston Street and under the East River. The third branch would have split from the 8th Avenue line south of Canal Street before running under Worth Street all the way into Brooklyn. The Houston Street and Worth Street subways would have met at Havermeyer Street, where they would have shared a station before meeting up with the line from 2nd Avenue at Broadway. The 6-track line would continue on to Myrtle Avenue, where 2 tracks would run up the BMT Myrtle Avenue line and then onto the Rockaway line, and 4 tracks would have run down Stuyvesant and Utica Avenues. I've mentioned the IND second system multiple times in this series, but haven't fully explained what it is, so I'll do that now. The IND second system was an ambitious expansion plan meant to build on the first parts of the IND system, today's A, C, E, and G trains, the Rockaway Park Shuttle, and parts of the B, D, F, M, and R trains. This plan, if implemented, would have added about 82 route miles to the system and would have filled in a major transit desert in Queens, which still exists to this day. The project was ultimately killed by the Great Depression, although the current 2nd Avenue line in Manhattan is an evolved form of part of the plan, and the Queensway proposal is also very similar to a portion of the second system. This next remnant is pretty obvious. At Myrtle Avenue, on the BMT Jamaica Line, there is an abandoned upper level with a platform and trackways. This infrastructure belonged to the BMT Myrtle Avenue line, which used to run past Myrtle Avenue all the way to downtown Brooklyn, then over the Brooklyn Bridge into Manhattan. The tracks over the Brooklyn Bridge closed in 1944, and the rest of the demolished section closed in 1969. The demolished portion of the line was closed as a cost-cutting measure as the line received relatively low ridership. The remaining portion of the line was similarly almost closed in 1986, but the plan received enough backlash that it was canceled. I personally love Myrtle Avenue, especially the view you get looking east down the line. If the weather is right, you can see all the way to Broadway Junction, and can watch as trains slowly inch their way down the line towards or away from you. Additionally, watching trains navigate the tight curve onto the Myrtle Avenue line is always fun, as I strangely like the squealing sound that trains make when they go around sharp curves. At Bedford-Nostrand Avenues on the IND Crosstown Line, trackways extend east past the station under Lafayette Avenue. This would have been for a line that would have merged with the aforementioned branch from Broadway at Knickerbocker Avenue. This is yet another provision for the IND second system. One stop down the line at Classon Avenue, there is a trackway for a storage and layup track that was never utilized. It would have been used to support the branch of the Crosstown Line to Myrtle Avenue. That's the third IND second system provision of the video. Broadway Junction and Atlantic Avenue stations have a large number of disused trackways and viaducts between them. The former track layout here is way too complicated to get into fully right now, but I will go over the trackways that still exist. On the south side of Broadway Junction, the trackways on the lower level led to the Fulton Street L. There are 3 mainline trackways coming from Atlantic Avenue and 1 trackway coming from East New York Yard. The upper-level trackways are where connections from the former 6 tracks at Atlantic Avenue to the Canarsie and Jamaica lines were. Directly north of Atlantic Avenue, the elevated structure is huge to accommodate all the switches between the tracks. At Atlantic Avenue, there are 4 abandoned trackways, which facilitated the complex service pattern between the 3 lines in the area. The 2 eastern trackways carried on over Snedeker Avenue and parallel to the 4 tracks over Van Sinderen Avenue. At Pitkin Avenue, there are 3 trackways remaining. 2 coming from the north are where the Fulton Street line branched off onto its own alignment, and the one coming from the south is where the former northbound Canarsie Line track switched streets to the Snedeker Avenue. Atlantic Avenue was drastically scaled back when the BMT Fulton Street Line was closed and demolished. This was done as the IND Fulton Street Line, an underground line, was built to replace most of it. As a result, the tracks were rearranged into the current layout. Broadway Junction is another station that I adore. In fact, it is my favorite station on the system. This is because I love the sight of complex steel and ironwork, especially when it points to the history of an area. To the east of the IND Fulton Street Line platforms at Broadway Junction are a pair of Bellmouths from a plan to connect the Fulton Street Line with the Jamaica Line, which predates the IND second system. On the BMT Jamaica Line, just east of Broadway Junction, a third trackway rises to an upper level before ending at Alabama Avenue. This was supposed to be for an express track, but in the course of construction, engineering studies found that the vibrations of trains passing overhead would be too severe and would make the entire section of the viaduct structurally unsound. At Chestnut Street, which is located between the Crescent Street and Norwood Avenue stations on the BMT Jamaica Line, a very small, barely noticeable section of trackway exists. This is a remnant of the Chestnut Street Incline, a track connection to the LRR's Atlantic branch, which enabled LRR trains to run into Manhattan before the East River tunnels were built. Service ended in 1917 and the incline was demolished in 1942. Moving on, we come to DeKalb Avenue, pronounced DeKalb in Atlanta. Kind of confusing, I know. On the BMT Brighton and 4th Avenue lines and the Manhattan Bridge tracks. There's a few remnants here, the first of which are abandoned platform segments to the south of the station. In the 1950s, the station and surrounding area received a huge overhaul, more on that in a bit. Part of the overhaul included doubling the length of the platforms to take 10-car trains, the new standard length. The very south tips of the extensions are located on curves, so they were later replaced with new extensions to the north. Now, it's time for some history. DeKalb Avenue is a major junction station, with 3 routes to the north and 2 routes to the south. Back before 1956, a lot of the changing between lines was done via crossovers, which caused the area to become a huge bottleneck as trains would block each other's paths. To alleviate this, the station was rebuilt from 1956 to 1961. The crossovers to the north of the station were replaced by a flyover or simply not replaced. To the south of the station, crossovers were eliminated as the track configuration was changed to be more efficient. The trackways for some of these crossovers remain today. Additionally, one of the trackways that went out of service after the rebuild is still extant. I love a good railway junction, especially a complex one, so DeKalb Avenue is another one of those stations that I adore. I'll probably do a track layout breakdown for this station in the future, so subscribe so you don't miss it. As part of the rebuild of DeKalb Avenue, the Myrtle Avenue station was closed and the southbound platform demolished. The northbound platform is still there and is home to an art installation called Masstransiscope. This is a zoetrope, which shows a sequence of pictures to give the illusion of motion. If you look out the right window in the direction of travel on a northbound B or Q train, you can see the artwork, although I am not sure of its current condition. Also south of DeKalb Avenue is a Bellmouth. Leading onto the northbound Brighton track, this Bellmouth is a provision for the Ashland Place connection, which would have connected the Brighton line to the previously mentioned BMT Fulton Street line. Just south of DeKalb Avenue is Nevins Street on the IRT Eastern Parkway line. Many provisions can be found in the vicinity of the station, but first, 2 remnants. First are 2 crossovers between the local and express tracks to the north of the station. More significant is the 5th trackway in the center of the station, whose track still exists once the trackway leaves the station proper. To the north of the station, a trackway splits from the southbound local track, which parallels the main line before ramping down to an unused lower level. As the tracks curve, another trackway emerges, which is a provision for this line to be extended onto the Manhattan Bridge. The track then proceeds through the lower level of the station with a single side platform. Immediately south of the station, a Bellmouth splits from the trackway, which is a provision for a subway under Lafayette Avenue. This Bellmouth is mirrored on the northbound side. The main trackway then abruptly ends as it was cut off by the construction of the IND lines in the area. On the other side of the IND track, the trackway continues, where it ramps up and rejoins the southbound local track. Between the merge point and Atlantic Avenue, another set of Bellmouths split, which are provisioned for a subway under 4th Avenue, which the BMT later built. The last Bellmouth is between the previous Bellmouths and Atlantic Avenue, but only on the northbound side. This is a provision for a connection to the LRRR at Atlantic Terminal. When I started researching this video, I had no idea how many provisions and remnants were adjacent to this one station. It's insane to think about how they were able to squeeze so many into a relatively small area. Staying in the area, we come to Hoyt-Schermerhorn streets on the IND Crosstown and Fulton street lines. The station has 4 island platforms and 6 tracks, with both the outer tracks and platforms being unused. The outer tracks lead to Court Street Station, which was served by a shuttle between the two stations, the HH or Court Street Shuttle. Due to low ridership, the service was cut in 1946 and Court Street was closed and later converted into the New York Transit Museum. Originally, the HH was supposed to run the entire length of the Fulton Street line to Euclid Avenue, with the CC, now the C, terminating in southern Manhattan, and the A running through the Cranberry Street Tunnel to connect the two lines. In the end, the A and CC both round up running the length of both lines. Bergen Street Station, the next stop south on the Crosstown Line, has a partially unused lower level. This lower level is home to the IND Culver Lines, which the Crosstown Line merges into, express track, while the local tracks are on the upper level. I say partially unused because while the tracks are used by the 2 weekday F Express round trips, they do not stop here. The lack of F Express service here seems to stem from the high cost required to rebuild the express platforms, which have been out of service since 1976 and have since had support facilities built on them. To the east, at Utica Avenue on the IND Fulton Street Line and Bedford-Stuyvesant, is an unfinished station above the current station, with room for 4 tracks and 2 island platforms. This is similar to the unfinished station above Broadway on the Crosstown Line. The station was meant to be used by a subway under Utica Avenue, which makes this the 4th provision from the IND second system in this video. Moving south along Utica Avenue, at Crown Heights, Utica Avenue, on the IRT Eastern Parkway Line, there are bellmouths leading off the local tracks that were also meant for a subway under Utica Avenue. The BMT Franklin Avenue line is weird for a rapid transit line in that it is single-tracked for much of its length. This means that trains in both directions use the same track. However, the portion that is now single-tracked didn't used to be this way, and you can still see some remnants of the second track if you look out the west side of a shuttle train between Prospect Park and Franklin Avenue. Directly south of 36th Street on the BMT 4th Avenue line, there are 4 bellmouths for a quad-track subway under 40th Street. The initial plan for this part of the subway was to build underground to link with the Culver and West End lines. Instead, the final plan utilized the South Brooklyn Railway's right-of-way. At 9th Avenue, the next stop down the line for D trains, there is an unused lower level. This was used by trains on the Culver Line before it was connected to the IND's Culver Line. In addition to the lower level, there are trackways that trace where the Culver Line went. If you follow that line, you'll come to Ditmas Avenue. This is where the Culver Line curves south towards Coney Island. Now, the tracks ramp down underground to Church Avenue. There is still a trackway from when the line was operated as a shuttle between here and 9th Avenue. Jumping south on the 4th Avenue line, at 59th Street, there are 2 tunnel provisions leading off the local tracks to the south of the station. These were meant to connect with the partially built Staten Island Tunnel, which would have linked the railways of Brooklyn and the 4th Avenue line to the Staten Island Railway. Only 150-foot long portion of the 10,400-foot tunnel was built, located under Owl's Head Park. Imagine the transit possibilities if this tunnel was actually completed. There would be a higher order transit link between Brooklyn and Staten Island, allowing for a larger variety of trips to be made by subway. Who knows? This may have even spurred expansion of the Staten Island Railway. The BMT Sea Beach Line is wide enough for 4 tracks, but one of them has been removed. Additionally, the BMT Sea Beach Line's express trackways extend west past its connection to the 4th Avenue line. This is a remnant from when the line was a surface railway that ran to a ferry terminal in Bay Ridge. In fact, the Culver, West End, and Brighton lines also used to be surface railways. Far to the northeast on the IRT New Lots Line, there is a trackway where an express track could be added. At the end of the line at New Lots Avenue Station, the tracks continue into Livonia Yard. More significantly for the purposes of this video, are 2 trackways that curve to the north for a never-built extension along New Lots Avenue. To the east of Euclid Avenue on the IND Fulton Street Line is a huge mess of tracks, my favorite. This is where trains can enter Pitkin Yard and where the connection between the IND and BMT Fulton Street lines is located, with trains running via Grant Avenue Station. After the connection tracks rise up, the 4 mainline tracks continue for a short distance. This is a remnant of the original plan for the Fulton Street Line, which was to continue in a quad-track tunnel instead of running over the Fulton Street L. There are rumors that a station was built along these tracks and trackways at 76th Street, but there is not enough evidence to prove that this is actually the case. West 8th Street, New York Aquarium, is a bi-level station, with the BMT Brighton Line serving the upper level and the IND Culver Line serving the lower level, before trains run into Coney Island's Stillwell Avenue. On the Brighton Line, there are trackways from when the line also connected to the lower level. Moving back to the 4th Avenue Line and 59th Street, 2 trackways continue to the east of the current trackways, which are provisioned to convert the line to 4 tracks if demand ever warranted it. Another interesting thing here is that the line actually runs over a bridge as it runs over the LIRR's Bay Ridge branch, the only above-ground section on the line. This is despite it looking like you are in a tunnel, which is weird. Right before the Manhattan Bridge are Bellmouths for a loop track, which would have allowed trains to turn around without running into Manhattan. The Sheepshead Bay Racetrack was an important horse racing venue in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Due to its importance, spurs off the Brighton Line and the parallel LIRR Manhattan Beach branch were constructed to serve it. There are still trackways south of Neck Road from where the Brighton Line spur was. Canarsie Yard, located at the end of the BMT Canarsie Line next to Canarsie Rockaway Parkway, used to be slightly bigger than its current size. If you look at aerial imagery, you can clearly see where that part of the yard used to be. If we move northeast to the BMT Jamaica Line, we come to one of the sharpest curves on the B Division, a curve so sharp that it almost certainly wouldn't be built today. However, this curve used to be straight when the line terminated at the old Cypress Hills station. There are still trackway stubs from this old alignment present on the current structure. The South Brooklyn Railway is a very short railroad operated by the MTA, used today to take delivery of new trains and remove old trains from the system. It originally extended down McDonald Avenue on the surface, below the Culver Line's viaduct to Coney Island. It was operated by the BMT and ran passenger services, so is Subway adjacent. You can still see the alignment of the line between 36th, 38th Street yards and McDonald Avenue. These buildings look out of place compared to the surrounding buildings, as this is most likely the alignment of the railroad. Another old surface railroad alignment can be found south of Canarsie Rockaway Parkway. What is now the BMT Canarsie Line also used to be a surface railroad, which extended to Canarsie Pier where ferry service was available to the Rockaways. Using aerial imagery, you can clearly see where the alignment continues south of the station, curving to parallel 95th Street. The last remnant in Brooklyn is a set of 3 abandoned platforms, but first, some history. Back when the subway used tokens for fare payments, special money trains are run to collect the tokens and bring them to a central money processing facility at 370 J Street in Brooklyn. For ease of transfer, platforms were built leading to the building on all 3 divisions. The IND platform is located on the southbound Culver Line track at J Street Metrotech. The BMT platform is located just west of the station, and the IRT platform is located on the Eastern Parkway line nearby. If you want to see some revenue collection cars, aka the Money Train, visit the New York Transit Museum. As I was doing research for the track diagrams in this video, I came across something that isn't a remnant now, but will become one in the near future. Between Lafayette Avenue and Clinton-Washington Avenues on the IND Fulton Street line, there is a center layup track. This track will be removed as part of the Fulton Street Line's conversion to CBTC, which is a digital signaling system designed to allow trains to run more frequently and quicker. With that, we've covered every remnant of past infrastructure and provision for future infrastructure on the New York City subway. We've seen countless Bellmouths, which show that the planners and builders of the subway had the foresight to make it easier for the subway to expand in the future. The tangle of viaducts that exist at Broadway Junction and Queensboro Plaza tell the story of when the subway was even more elevated than it is today. They also illustrate the fact that it isn't always feasible to demolish old infrastructure, either because it would cost too much, and or because the old infrastructure is integral to the structural integrity of the end-use infrastructure. I believe the latter is why the upper level of Myrtle Avenue has not been demolished. If I had to pick a favorite remnant, it would be Broadway Junction and Atlantic Avenue, because I love the sight of steel and ironwork. In short, all this infrastructure gives us a glimpse into the history of one of the oldest and most complex metros in the world. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel for more train and public transit content. If you want to support the channel further, you can join us on Patreon or as a YouTube member for early access to videos, bonus footage, and more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.